Hello, everyone, and welcome to Performance Anxiety's fourth online reading event. Performance Anxiety is an online reading series hosted via Skype on the third Thursday of every month at 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central. My name is Tom Snarsky, and as one of the co-organizers of Performance Anxiety, I'm happy to be the MC of tonight's reading. If you'd be interested in sharing your work at a future event, you're more than welcome to get in touch with me on Twitter at Tom Snarsky, TomSnarsky, or via email at tomsnarsky@gmail.com. You can also get in touch with Kristen Garth, the other co-organizer of the series, and we'll let you know how when she shares her poems with us later this evening. At each of our events, we feature 10 different readers. Tonight it'll be 9 for logistics reasons, but they'll each have up to 5 minutes to share a selection of their writing with us. Performance Anxiety is a place for live poetry, for sure, but we also make space for folks who've taken the time to share recordings of their work with us as well. You'll hear a recording like that from Tony Treadway at the end of our reading tonight. This reading is an extra special event because, courtesy of our impresario in absentia, Johnny Longfellow, we've assembled for you this evening a lineup of accomplished formalist poets, some of whom are based out of the Powow River Poets Group in Newburyport, Massachusetts, and a few from beyond as well. Without any further ado, I'd like to introduce our first reader momentarily. So our first reader tonight is A.M. or Mike Juster. A.M. Juster has published 9 books of original and translated poetry. His work has appeared in Poetry, Paris Review, Hudson Review, and other journals. He's also the poetry editor for First Things. Please welcome with me, Mike Juster. Thanks, Mike, for being on our program tonight.
Thank you, Tom. I'm going to read 4 sonnets, 3 that won the Howard Nemeroff Sonnet Award, and then I'll close with one that did not win. Moscow Zoo. We saw the mass grave at the Moscow Zoo. A sullen man dug up a human skull, then held it high for journalists to view. Forensic specialists arrived to cull remains and clues from this forgotten plot on which the zoo still plans to cage a bear. The experts guessed these prisoners were shot for special reasons. No one was aware of comparable scenes at urban sites. No one knew if these bones belonged to spies, suspected Jews, or zealous Trotskyites, so none of us displayed the least surprise when bureaucrats emerged from quiet cars to hint this might have been the work of czars. Note from Echo. Narcissus, I no longer haunt the canyons and the crypts. I thrive and multiply. Uncounted daughters are my new companions. We are the voicemail's ponderous reply to the computers making random calls. We are the Muzak in the empty malls, the laugh track on the reruns late at night, the distant siren's chilling lullaby, the steady chirp of things that simplify their scheduled lives. You know I could recite more, but you never cared for my recitals. I do not miss you, do not need you here. I can repeat the words of your disciples, telling lovers what they need to hear. No. No, not this time. I cannot celebrate a man's discarded life and will not try. These knee-jerk elegies perpetuate the nightshade lies of Plath. Why glorify descent into a solipsistic hell? Stop. Slowly curse the waste. Don't elevate his suffering to genius. Never tell me he will live on. Never call it fate. Attend the service. Mourn. Pray. Comfort those he lacerated. Keep him in your heart, but use that grief to teach. When you compose a line, it is a message, not just art. Be furious with me, but I refuse to praise him. No, we have too much to lose. And I'll close with this one, Cancer Prayer. Dear Lord, please flood her nerves with sedatives and keep her strong enough to crack a smile so disbelieving friends and relatives can temporarily sustain denial. Please smite that intern in oncology who craves approval from department heads. Please ease her urge to vomit Let there be kind but flirtatious men in nearby beds. Given her hair, consider amnesty for sins of vanity, make mirrors vanish. Surround her with forgiving family and nurses not too numb to cry. Please banish trite consolations. Take her in one swift and gentle motion as your final gift. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Mike. That was beautiful. And if you're interested in finding more of Mike's work, you can find him on Twitter at AMJuster, AMJUSTER. And fortunately, he has a book of John Milton's The Book of Elegies that's coming out from the Padilla Press Institute, which I believe is coming out next year or in the next year or so. I really loved in that knee-jerk elegies, and a command that I think we can share with students, which is to use that grief to teach. So we're going to move to our next reader, Bob Crawford. So Robert Crawford has published 2 books of poetry, The Empty Chair from 2011, which won the Richard Wilbur Award, and Too Much Explanation Can Ruin a Man from 2005. His sonnets have twice won the Howard Nemerov Sonnet Award, and his poems have appeared in many national journals, including The Formalist, First Things, Dark Horse, the Raintown Review, The Lyric, Measure, Light, and Forbes. He co-founded the Hyla Brook Poets and is a longtime member of the Powow River Poets of Newburyport, Massachusetts. Currently, he's the director of poetry activities at the Robert Frost Farm in Derry, New Hampshire, and is serving as Derry's first poet laureate. He lives in Chester, New Hampshire, with his wife, the poet Midge Goldberg, from whom we'll hear later this evening. Take it away, Bob. Thank you so much for being on Performance Anxiety.
Hi, thank you, Tom. The first poem I'm going to read is inspired by the mathematical fact that in an infinite universe, everything will be duplicated. It's called Odds Are. Odds are there is another you, like you in every way, except that he likes scotch and you like gin. And unlike you, he grew a beard and won't consent to wear a watch. Someday, before the end of time, you'll meet, not if, but when, by chance at Maury's in Orion's belt. You'll buy a round and grab a seat, reflect on what might be and what has been. Though different, his stories of the twins and wives will celebrate the good and kind in ways you understand. And yes, his sins will be familiar too. You'll talk and find, as 2 moons slowly drift across the sky, a shared affection for the question why. This next poem is titled The KT Boundary, and it has an epigraph. The epigraph says, the Cretaceous Tertiary, the KT boundary, is a distinct layer in the rock strata laid down about 65 million years ago. Its creation coincides with the mass extinction of the dinosaurs, and it contains high levels of iridium, an element found in asteroids. On top of the food chain, they had few concerns. It was bathwater warm. There are plenty of ferns. A Cretaceous Isaiah could claim he divined that God in his wisdom had clearly designed a world without end for the dinosaur kind. Then out of the blue, it all changed for their lot. One day they were kings, and then they were not. All over the world, the great dinosaurs died. They starved, or they froze, or were suddenly fried. They found out the hard way the prophet had lied. Yet from the beginning, the end had been known, foretold in the orbit of one giant stone. It smashed into earth, ash covered the land. What happened to T-Rex, explained by the band, a line of iridium drawn in the sand. It circles and circles in this grand design, a ballet of masses, mostly benign. But sometimes the circles go bump in the night. So don't say I'm silly and switch off the light when I wake up feeling that something's not right. This next poem was written about one of the most important historical events to happen to New England in my lifetime. And it was written before that event took place. It's called When Boston Wins the Series. The throngs along the Esplanade, the Charles crowded with light, will be convinced there is a God, this time the world set right. We'll feel the city roar in bliss as we pass the Elliott Bar, enough relief and happiness to raise the evening star. We'll find a place to rest our feet upon a Fenway stair. You'll take my hand on Lansdowne Street, kiss me in Kenmore Square. We'll see replayed that winning run this patient town deserves, and find again the sacred in the geometry of curves. And this next poem is simply a love poem. It's called French Braids. While one hand is content to touch, admire a balanced, careful weave, preserve for viewing the beauty and the boundaries of desire, the other hand is busy at undoing. The quiet hand counsels restraint, afraid to wreck the composition of composure, it's wary of destruction just for fun. The other wants to slip between each braid, to tease apart the strands, let run, spill over, release, unbind what was so neatly done. Your urgent kiss decides which hand is played. A gentle pull brings argument to closure. My hands attempt to catch your hair. It falls the way the rain lets go the air. The final poem is called The Snowstorms That Remain. It's the title of my third book. The Snowstorms That Remain. I'm waiting like a child on Christmas Eve, waiting for dawn to show me that the snow is finally here. It's falling, I believe, but I'll need more of morning light to know. I'm waiting on the dawn to make the snow reveal itself against the row of pines. I need a minute more of light to know it's snow that's coming down in blurred white lines, revealed against the row of darker pines. I'm praying that it hasn't turned to rain. It's snow that's coming down in blurred white lines. I'm counting on the snowstorms that remain and praying that it hasn't turned to rain. The snow is here. It's falling, I believe. I'm counting down the snowstorms that remain and waiting like a child on Christmas Eve.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much, Bob. And as a math teacher, I really liked the math poem. That was beautiful. And if you'd like to read more of Bob Crawford's work, as he mentioned, his book, The Snowstorms That Remain, is forthcoming in 2020. So our next reader, I'm very privileged to introduce because she's also the co-organizer of Performance Anxiety. Kristen Garth is a pushcart, Best of the Net, and Riesling-nominated sonnet stalker. Her sonnets have stocked journals like Glass, Yes, 521, Luna Luna, and more. She's the author of 13 books of poetry, including Pink Plastic House from Maverick Duck Press, Candy, Cigarette, Woman, Child, Noir from the Hedgehog Poetry Press, the forthcoming Flutter, Southern Gothic Fever Dream from Twisted Press, The Meadow from APEP Publications, and that's kind of where she's at the moment. If you could follow her on Twitter at Lola and Jolie, LOLAANDJOLIE. You can contact her as well if you'd be interested in reading for poetry for Performance Anxiety. So join me in welcoming Kristen Garth. Thanks, Kristen.
Hi, I'm going to read a few sonnets from my book, Shakespeare for Sociopaths, and first, and then I'm going to read one from a new book that I'm doing called Shut Your Eyes, Succubi. When you are drowning in a car. When you are drowning in a car, headlights illuminate you, high-seen stars. Windshield fishbowl, a brown-black sky, midnight airtight, 3 hours to die. Alone, stretched neck appeals, air bubble breaths. 13 months you grieved his brother's death. A blonde borrowed from a boiler room. Black Oldsmobile, he leaves you, a tomb. 30, you'd be tomorrow in a week. Bobbing chin, passenger seat. When you are drowning in his car, do you believe the curse? Can't breathe, no stars. Fatigue scales, flat eyes float by tragedy, see through. Unempathetic view, your black bell jar. Just you alone and drowning in a car. And the next one is also a true crime poem called Slender Secrets. He thinks I had a choice. This grandpa cop in hipster glasses, ironed shirt who writes my words like tendrils, mansion, doesn't stop to question that they might be true. First night, seduced at 6 into your sly service. The circles drawn on dolls you say are meant for me unless I listen. Go from nervous to abject fear by 12 years old. You send by then your pixie proxy, swimming pools with slender secrets. Sharp sacrifice we surmise because we both see. Two tools who'll slice like air for you, a strawberry. You taught me that a knife is but a key, to kill a friend, not choice, necessity. And my third poem is called Betazoid, and it's a little Star Trek sonnet. The aftermath is bubble bath. You're half the problem, easy math. Semi-self-directed, rose-water wrath. One more jaunt, a primrose path. Empathic on their behalf. Rejected, sobbing, for another sociopath. You know you are from Beta Z. Some Star Trek jargon, high school boyfriend said. Empath, who feels it twice as much. You wear the scars of all you touch. The heartless want you, feed on pain. Your double dividend, same cut of fang. Expound their emptiness as need. Always open to whom you should stay shut. What cannot feel wants to be felt, vain void. Sociopaths consume betazoid. And my final poem is from a new book that I have coming out called Shut Your Eyes, Succubi. Inside four-poster beds where you recline, retreat into your wicked minds. Sometimes a storyteller pats your heads, supine, imbibing incantations said in rhyme, ceremonial sorcery, until above a quilt, bodies hover free. Flesh you dress to agitate, Puritans will ascend 2 feet and levitate, possessed with pleasures of the night, past concerns, wrong and right, pretense you are human at all, a body that could ever fall, make songs from lips which sound like hymns. You will recall some mornings with your pens, how lullabies taught you to fly. Shut your eyes, succubi. Thank you.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Kristen. Kristen's one of the few poets who can pull off a transition from the image of a strawberry to a knife to a key in like one line. So, and it's a privilege to co-host Performance Anxiety with Kristen. And if you want to get in touch with her to talk about performance anxiety or to learn more about her work, you can find her again on Twitter at Lola and Jolie, LOLA. ANDJOLIE, and on her website, Kristen Garth, KRISTINGARTH.com. So without further ado, our next reader will be Midge Goldberg, mentioned previously in Bob Crawford's bio. So Midge Goldberg received the Richard Wilbur Award for her book Snowman's Code, as well as the Nemiroff Sonnet Award. Her poems have appeared in Measure, Light, and on Garrison Keillor's A Writer's Almanac. She lives in New Hampshire with her family, 2 cats, and an ever-changing number of chickens. Midge, thank you so much for joining Performance Anxiety. Take it away.
Thank you, Tom. Well, I'll start with the poem that won the Nemiroff. And the idea for this came from my son, who uttered this perfect iambic pentameter sentence, which became the first line of the poem. The poem is called Tennis Practice Against the Garage Door. Impossible to win against the wall, my son mutters. I hear the bounce and slam as he goes on hitting the tennis ball. It's arc and dip and arc, a sonogram of will. The wall returns one down the line, straight back at him, or else, in wall-like folly, ricochets one off its beveled design. It's out of bounds, and so he wins that volley. Battling for the point that wins the game, he finally calls, add in, against the door. Gripping the racket, he takes careful aim. This is the moment he's been training for. The beauty in tenacity and sweat, the ace over the imaginary net. Harpsichord. What happened to the harpsichord for whom the great composers scored? Scarlatti, Purcell, Bach, and Bird. Those Goldberg variations stirred the soul until one holy day Cristofori began to play. The piano's forte, sounding loud and soft, and suddenly the crowd was wowed. Indeed, the horde was floored. Oh Lord, we're bored with the harpsichord. So many levers, so few keys, to do what pianos do with ease. The final blow was who was siding with pianos? Mozart, Haydn. Over the years, few played it. Lurch, some vicar at some village church, a carpenter out in Seattle preserved the craft, an uphill battle. But honestly, it just sounds tinny, grating, like my cousin Vinny. Just because of a simple hammer, pianos still get all the glamour. The harpsichord's flat out of luck, with no one left to give a pluck. So I'm a big eavesdropper. I was in a medical setting earlier this summer, so no better place to eavesdrop. This one is called The Doctor and the Patient in the Next Exam Bay. Sing it again, I want to ask them both, as I sit here alone behind meshed drapes, on paper drawn across a vinyl table. Easier to clean, but somehow sticky, not cold, instead uncomfortably warm, as though I feel the heat of the last patient's old man, sad woman, as though they might be catching. Sing it again, I want to ask them both, this patient and her doctor, reminiscing about their old high school, a place I know is run down now, dingy and not the jewel that they remember. She's in her 70s. I overheard her birth date earlier. The doctor sounds younger, but not by much. Sing it again, I wish, when they are done. It took me by surprise to hear them there, talking about a neighborhood and then singing Christos Anesti, their favorite prayer. It took me by surprise in this fluorescent light where I've been waiting, though not too long, that people sometimes do burst into song. And I'll finish with an early sonnet that I wrote. The first one that I read was about my son. This one is about my daughter when she was very young. It's called The Fish. But what about the fish? My daughter asks. We're reading, for a bedtime story, Noah, who's busy with at least 1 million tasks, preparing place for sheep, flamingo, boa. But there's no mention of the fish. I say, that's true. Of course, they wouldn't care about a flood. In fact, they'd have more room that way. But why did God decide to leave them out? Were they unsullied more than beast or bird? Forgotten? Was it too hard to make disaster really work for everyone? No word on this. They got no promises or master. Nothing they did not need. No watery bow. Untouched by God, the fish stayed safe below. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Midge. That was beautiful. And my wife is a music teacher, so I look forward to sharing the harpsichord poem with her. Thank you. And if you'd like to find more of Midge's work, you can find Midge on Twitter at Midge Goldberg, MIDGEGOLDBERG. And you can find her more of her poetry published online at midgegoldberg.com. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my friend and first-time reader at Performance Anxiety, Owen Gray. Owen Gray is an English teacher and formalist poet. He's a member of the Powow River Poets, and you can see him most weeks on Wednesday nights at the Boston Poetry Slam at the Cantab Lounge. So Owen, take it away. Thank you for coming on to Performance Anxiety.
Thank you for having me, Tom. I've got 3 poems for you tonight, a longer one to start and then 2 shorter lyrics. How to prepare a meal for the dead. First, before you can begin, you have to ask yourself which ones among the dead to welcome in. You cannot serve them all. You can't. You have to ask yourself which ones you loved the best, or well enough. They've discarded all their earthly ways. You have to ask yourself which ones will find their way to your open door. 1. Begin with soup. a hearty broth with chunks of flesh and lots of fat. Help them recall the weight of life. You cannot wait for it to cool. They know too well the cold of night. They'll howl and beg if asked to wait. They only know insistence now. 2. The salad course will give them hope of their return in a distant spring. You have to lie to them, you know, and let them think they could return, could walk again beneath the sun. It is a mercy you should grant. You know that they will only be dust and half-remembered things. So layer high their plates with greens, iron-rich spinach for their strength, carrots to help them see in the dark, diced onions and arugula, tomatoes red as living blood. Remember that you owe them this. 3. The main course is the toughest one. Red meat is best. They'll want it rare. They always linger near the blood. They cannot handle bone. Now be aware they'll ask for more than you're prepared to offer them. They'll have forgotten all you gave to them in life, your energy and time, the stuff of life itself. They will not say it was enough. They will not give you gratitude. You have to want to make this meal. And even when you don't, they'll come. And you must wait for them this time, no matter how long it takes. Yes, even when your meal grows cold. You won't be hungry anyway. This next poem is called Sitting with Jane. The river's mirrored face is troubled by the wind that cools our summer days, bending our pages, taking our voices away. The feel of our summer days so near their end, mid-August light, fading and cool. You tell me of the evening sun, your sorrows as you spun around in a yellow dress, the dread of waiting for the bus, your canvas bag, the life you had. The setting sun now paints the sky with morning-colored light. I listen and I see anew that sorrow I have always known. My last poem tonight is called My Father's House. Nature seems poised to take it back from him. The knee-high grass and ivy vines, the trees untended, wild, now free from human hands, all tell of days to come. I step inside to find the peeling paint and ashy rugs that only vaguely seem like those I knew. An odor rises from the basement halls of standing water and the mold it's brought. Another wilderness he's left behind. The dust now covers all the books he has not read, the history books he said he'd love, the fantasies of wizards and old kings, futures impossible, already past, save those self-helps, dog-eared like man's best friend. His chair still sits where he once sat, so near his old TV. I half expect to find the ash of some forgotten cigarette where unpaid bills are piled up instead. There are no cards, no letters sending love or hope, no remembrances of life well lived. Only this stack of obligations left behind and unfulfilled. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Owen. Owen's been hearing for a very long time how much I love that poem, My Father's House, and I'm so glad to have gotten to hear it with y'all tonight. So thank you, Owen, and I could not think of a better transition into someone who, to me, is a living legend and to whom we are very, very happy to have on Performance Anxiety this evening, Rina Espaillat. So Rina Espaillat is a Dominican-born bilingual poet, essayist, short story writer, and translator into and out of English and her native Spanish, as well as a former English teacher in the New York City high schools. She's published 16 books, several of them bilingual, including one of translations of Robert Frost and another of translations of Richard Wilbur. She's the director and a founding member of the Powow River Poets. Rina, thank you so much for coming here tonight and joining us on Performance Anxiety. I look forward to hearing your poems.
Thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this with so much good company. My 4 poems that I'm reading tonight are about the passage of time and the way that poetry permits us to do a little time traveling, the way dreams do sometimes and the way memory does. My first poem is the way we travel backward through dreams. This is called I Dreamt You Young. I dreamt you young, my father, in your white shirt sleeves and soft fedora, rowing toward me, smiling, where I stood on shore, a slight tilt of your head inviting me aboard. The drops your paddles scattered, stroke by stroke, wafted a summer scent, both rank and sweet, from reedy depths that shimmered like swirled smoke. Your laughter lifted, all but swept my feet over the thwart to find the seat beside you, Father, steadied by your outstretched hand. But cries of children born after you died woke me to my familiar place on land. I have grown older now than you were then, but not too old to be your child again. And this is a memory of my hometown in Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic, and it's called Where Childhood Lives. In my hometown, the nights are warm, and flies are watchful at the net, as if remember posted guards along the borders of forget. And all night long in slow exchange, a dialogue of plunk and plink, from leaky roof to rusty basin, echoes what the raindrops think. Along the wall where lizards hunt, mosquitoes urge their long complaint, and pious photographs commingle the dead, the living, and the saint. One rooster, two, then 5 or 6 from hill to valley rout the night, and maids sigh up from creaky springs to morning prayer and kitchen light. Along my narrow shuttered street trot little donkeys, gray as dust, stopping to nuzzle here and there at orange peel and cracker crust. And morning takes the river road down to the bank where childhood lives, where stones and water know my name and stroke me with diminutives. Sometimes you can discover the past where you least expect it in the faces of the young. You look at any of the children in your family, and you'll discover the faces of the older members who are now gone. This is called variations. Family faces modulate like variations on a theme, so that in chordal passages the decades shift without a seam, the living echoing the dead to dress themselves in borrowed grace. I like to find my father's look safe in my son's unwounded face. Such grave harmonics lend us back the only paradise we know. An idle game with time, but still not bad as resurrections go. And here we're going to take a trip into the future to my great-great-grandson, who does not exist yet, for my great-great-grandson, the space pioneer. You, what's your name, who down the highways of my blood are hurtling toward the future, tell me if you've packed the 1,000 flavors of the wind, the river's voice, the tongues of moss and fern singing the earth. And where have you left the rain? Careful, don't lose it, nor the moan of the seagull in her blue desert, nor those stars, warm as caresses, you will not find again in your nights of steel. Watch that you don't run short of butterflies. Learn the colors of the hours. And here, in this little case of bones, I've left you the perfume of the sea. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rena. It's been a pleasure to have you and to hear those poems. And only from Rena Espaillat will you hear a prepositional phrase like "in my son's unwounded face." That was beautiful. So if you're interested in learning more about Rena's work, Rena has many websites where you can find her poetry. And the spelling again of her name is Rena, R-H-I-N-A, Espaillat, E-S-P-A-I. LLAT, and as director of the Powow River Poets, if you're interested in learning more about that group, she's the one to talk to. Our next reader, who's with Rena tonight, is Alfred Nicole. Alfred Nicole's most recent collection of poetry, Animal Psalms, was published in 2016 by Able Muse Press. He has published 2 other collections, Elegy for Everyone from 2009 and Winter Light, which received the 2004 Richard Wilbur Award. Nicole's poem Addendum was included in the 2018 edition of Best American Poetry. Alfred, thank you very much. We're looking forward to hearing your poems tonight.
Thanks, Tom. I'm going to read several of the shorter poems in my most recent collection, Animal Psalms. This first is a sonnet titled Genius is only good for what it's good for. It has an epigraph concerning a stock market bubble that popped in the 18th century. Here's the epigraph. Stocks in the South Sea Company climbed to 1,000 British pounds before falling to nothing in 1720. A massive amount of money was lost. Genius is only good for what it's good for. The stiff who breaks his back to make ends meet believes if he were smarter, he'd be rich. He'd climb out of his rut and find his niche. More brains would put him in the driver's seat. Soon he'd be getting places on the street. Going for broke would go without a hitch. He'd toss the t-shirt printed "Life's a bitch." He'd wear the one declaring life is sweet. Sir Isaac Newton, though, found out too late that he was bright enough to calculate the motions of celestial spheres, but not the madness of the people. He too bought shares in the soaring South Sea Company, ignoring what he knew of gravity. I'm going to read a second sonnet that describes a very different approach to life. It's called An Innocence. Like Robert Burns, I too turn up a nest while working, raking last year's leaves in spring, but not a mouse. Pale rabbits, shivering, rustled from their blind and naked rest. If they showed fright, I'd feel it in my chest, but only shying from the chill, they cling together close, alive as anything, 3 steps from Route 1A. Unwelcome guest, I have surprised them in their nursery, stumbling on the bed and canopy their diligent though absent mother built, with muzzle-fashioned straw and lappin quilt. But I am less disturbance than a flea. They focus on the task at hand, to be. My next poem employs a mathematical metaphor. If this were a video, I'd use a visual aid to remind you how an ellipse is different from a circle in that a circle has one center, while the oval-shaped ellipse has not one focal point, but 2 foci. Ellipse. Restless, off-center again. So often now it seems a kind of starting point, familiar in its way. A place I might come back to on my own. Could be I shouldn't try to shake this. Haven't lost my focus, only that another has developed and there's no one center now. I'm someone else as well. This one and that one both. No need to come around. So I'll close my reading with a poem called One Day. One day. We walked in light and shade along the lichened wall. No task at hand and nothing planned. The poplar branches swayed, and Finley chased his ball. And something made us smile, and something else again. Nothing less than happiness, and good to last a while. Enough to last till when this simple summer day of not too much to do may be the one we look back on when years have swirled away. And days like these are few. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Alfred. That closing poem was gorgeous. And again, I collect poems with math metaphors, so that's a really great addition to the collection. If you'd like to read more of Alfred's work, you can find him on Twitter at Alfred_Nicol. So Alfred, ALFRED _NICOL. And you can also find his published poems collected together at alfrednicol.com, same spelling. Our next reader, our second to last reader, as it were, is Chris O'Carroll. So Chris O'Carroll is an actor, comedian, Light magazine featured poet, and author of The Joke's on Me from White Violet Press in 2019. His poems have appeared in Love Affairs at the Villanelle, New York City Haiku, and the Great American Wise Ass Poetry Anthology. Please join me in welcoming Chris O'Carroll. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Tom. I'd like to begin at the end. This is Ode to Old Age. I walk into a room and suddenly I'm at a loss. What did I want in here? That puckish brain tweaker, reality, has learned to shift its shape or disappear. I used to have to smoke expensive weed to tune into this zoned out paradigm. Today, my skull packs all the buzz I need. I'm high on failing cells and passing time. Each friend or relative that I outlive is one less witness to my foolish youth. Now, any version of the past I give is more or less the undisputed truth. What names and numbers I may have forgotten are obligations I've been glad to shed. Untangled from the past I once was caught in, I rest in peace before I'm even dead. This next poem is inspired by one of Shakespeare's most popular plays, and if you can't tell which one, I have really screwed up here. Although they had been, well, you've got to be, carefully taught to hate all of the people their relatives thought they ought to, at first sight they fell hard. They played passionate, eloquent scenes. Then they died for their star-crossed love, silly, impetuous teens. Some scholars insist we can't rate them authentically tragic because they were done in by chance, not fate's classic bad magic. But still, they've acquired a mystique that few couples can equal. And how many love affairs since theirs have written their sequel? If you were born, say, white or black, Muslim, Christian, or Jew, such that someone's been brought up to hate you because you are you, and your heart strays to some place your tribe would prefer it not go, then you know what those kids from Verona paid dearly to know, that the yes of two souls tells more truth than the no of two factions, that hatred and love can be equally fatal attractions. Now, I am a Massachusetts boy, born and bred, but for 20 years I lived out on the Great Plains in Kansas. The sky is bigger out there, and some of nature's phenomena are correspondingly supersized. So this is a poem I might never have written if I had never left my native New England. Who knows? Meteor shower. A comet strews its path with cosmic crumbs, motes, cast-off scraps of solar system stuff, specks inconsiderable, yet enough to coruscate. Around our planet comes a yearly fire-eyed impresario bent on refashioning each humble grain into a drop of incandescent rain, the star of its own brief but brilliant show. We snag bits of debris in high, thin air and frenzy them to glow and disappear. Some drill our night sky, lunge with white-hot spears. Others trace threads as fine as baby hair. Alike to dainty wisp and lancing thrust, we, dust, amply entertained by dust. And I would like to finish with a love poem because, you know, love. This is a poem that obviously owes a tip of the hat to Lewis Carroll's Jabberwocky, Nonsense Love. You gimble with my vorpal blade. I gyre in your wabe. I whiffle tulgy coinages for such a frabjous babe. 'Tis brillig, and my love's unhinged in uffish consequence. My tangled tongue is burbling you with words that make no sense. Callooh, Calais, I want to say, I'm beamish that you're mine. My borough groves are mimsy, and my heart is on the line. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris. I like your reading order because it's fun to imagine the Romeo and Juliet as characters living in the love poem world of that last one. And Chris O'Carroll's newest book, again, is called The Joke's on Me, out this year from White Violet Press. So take a look into it if you'd be interested in learning more about Chris's work. We are almost coming to the close of tonight's reading, but as we said in the introduction, performance anxiety is not always a space for live poets to perform live and share their work in real time. Toni Treadway is our last reader, and she shared a recording of her work with us that I'll be playing back for you momentarily. Toni Treadway joined Rena Espaillat's workshop, the Powow River Poets, 15 years ago. Her first book of poems, Late Harvest, was published in 2018. Its title poem was a runner-up for the Robert Frost Foundation Prize. As Brodsky and Treadway, she restores unique films for major archives. So without further ado, here's Toni Treadway sharing with us some poems.
Hello, this is Toni Treadway making you an audio recording of 3 poems from my new book, Late Harvest, my first that came out in December 2018 from Kelsey Books. All the weird ones come to me. Because I look them in the eye, because my big brother is crazy, all the bagmen, the artists, gonzos, spare change rattling,
And due to minor technical difficulties, we're going to restart Toni's recording for you in a moment. Toni shared these poems with us via email, and we'll get them back up momentarily. Here we go.
Hello, this is Toni Treadway making you an audio recording of 3 poems from my new book, Late Harvest, my first that came out in December 2018 from Kelsey Books. All the weird ones come to me. Because I look them in the eye, because my big brother is crazy, all the bagmen, the artists, gonzos, spare change rattling, careful gleam in the eye, nothing up the sleeve, hustle around so that no one sees, quick, quick men, all the fruitcakes you're bound to meet on the streets of America. So I visit my brother in the nut house, and they gather around to bum a light, to smell me, to tell me, to show me, and never once to hurt me, except in their pressing in all the time with so much need. And then my brother shepherds me outside to his own needs, more transparent to me than the ones inside. If I touch him as he leaves, he does not leave so hard, nor go so far. And next, a love poem. You in Socks. The shine on red oak stairs and you in socks. That's how I polish them, you say, and laugh. So down you go with water in a glass. Look, ma, no hands to tumble on your ass. Watch out, my love. Do not upend your life with urgent trips to doctors and PT. Please understand. I'm sorry, but it's me with worries brimming to the nth degree. I have to let my would-be mother out. Maternal energies, when set aside, can turn into hovering by a spouse who wants to tend her loved ones, lest they fall into swift depths or be consumed by all the dragons underneath her childless bed. And finally, the title poem, Late Harvest, which I am proud to say was a runner-up at the Robert Frost Foundation's contest in 2019 in Lawrence, Massachusetts, where Frost went to high school. Late Harvest. The berries that withstand the frost, if they endure at all, have liquored juice and puckered flesh, unlike the fruit of fall. They're hanging in the garden's ruin until some hand or wing can part the crumpled, mildewed leaves and grasp the precious thing. Thank you for listening.
Truly, no technical difficulties can eclipse poems like those. That, again, was Toni Treadway, whose work, again, her book Late Harvest was published in 2018. And if you'd like to learn a little bit more about the ancient film history, in Toni's words, that she works in as Brodsky and Treadway, you can visit littlefilm.org for more information. So with that, we conclude tonight's performance anxiety reading event. So thank you all so much, the amazing poets who shared their work with us tonight, and to every listener out there who will generously give this hour to poetry. As one of our previous readers, Joe Ianni, put it, I do believe if we prepare the table, poetry will sit down and dine with us. So we very much hope you'll join us for our next reading on Thursday, October 17th. And we're going to close looking forward to that reading with a quick poem by Thomas James, which is fittingly for our formalist poetry night written in Terza Rima. It's called Jason. Leaving. The leaves relax, crusted brown, upset in the disoriented light. Temples of gold front the afternoon. I come in dry-shod in my mushroom-colored coat and lean a golden branch on the bronze vase. I watch the impermanent green disintegrate. Lobster-colored clouds merge and pass on the arbor's dilapidated bones. I raise my brush. Softly I release a runnel of gold. Morning glory vines strangle the canvas. Quince goes up in smoke. Mornings are smeared with a little fog, dead browns. I paint the morning, its embroidered silk, the sky's incertitudes, shut-off stars, a few innocuous pods beginning to break. I paint this room, the vase, straw-bottomed chairs, the bedspread stitched with thin blue petals where I wake at dawn in a meadow of cornflowers. I learn the lion color of these hills. I am full of the old fear of coming home, stopping in darkness under the maples. I have sketched the soft orchard, the whorl of time. A gold leaf skips over the hardwood floor, and nobody minds what these dark things have become. Fistfuls of brightness on clear water, a handful of wafers when the season broke. I dream of the innumerable antlers of winter, the crude, unpainted branch. My mother and father walk, knee-deep in leaf of oak, in a garden where it is always October. Thank you.